Good evening, and let us settle in. Tonight, we journey back in time, into the lively, smoky, and perhaps slightly sticky world of the medieval tavern. This establishment was the unsung heart of every town, an unofficial center for news, and often, the one place where a knight, a farmer, and a bard could all find themselves in a similar state of cheerful inebriation. It was more than just a place to drink. It was a vibrant hub where danger, laughter, and disease could mingle freely beneath a simple thatched roof. Before we get too comfortable, please feel free to show your support with a like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy the stories we share here. I would also be delighted to know where you are listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It is always a pleasure to see our community connecting from all corners of the globe. Now, let us dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle, humming sound, and smoothly begin tonight's journey together. Imagine you have just trudged through a muddy street, one that smells of a unique blend of horse, smoke, and a questionable soup. It is raining, as it often is, or it has just finished, leaving everything slick, including your only pair of shoes. You are tired, you are hungry, and you have narrowly avoided being run over by a cart filled with turnips. Not once, but twice. You are in desperate need of a drink. So, how do you find a tavern in a medieval town? There are no glowing neon signs, no online reviews, and certainly no GPS to guide you. What you do have, however, are your ears. You simply follow the noise. Somewhere past the blacksmith's forge and the fishmonger shouting about his fresh river eels, you will hear a chorus of laughter, boisterous shouts, and the sound of someone singing rather aggressively about a goose. And there it is, a crooked wooden building, leaning slightly to one side, as if the architecture itself has had one too many. Hanging above the door is a wooden sign, its image barely legible. A crude painting that might be a barrel or perhaps a bear, could even be both. Regardless, this is your destination. Welcome to the tavern. The front step is slick with spilled ale, and as you push open the heavy, iron-hinged door, it lets out a creak so long and dramatic that it could almost be considered a form of entertainment in itself. Instantly, a wave of warm air, laden with the rich sense of smoke, wet wool, stale beer, and a mysterious meat, hits your face like a clumsy handshake. You have made it. Inside, the ceiling is low enough to make tall men duck and cause those who have been drinking to frequently bump their heads. The floor is not metaphorically dirt. It is literally dirt. Someone has scattered straw in an attempt to create an illusion of cleanliness, but it offers no real improvement. There are no private booths, no waiters offering menus, and no such thing as a quiet conversation. This is a medieval tavern, and it operates in only two modes: rowdy or closed due to a fire. You spot an available space on a lopsided bench near the hearth, but it is damp with something you would rather not ask about. Someone nearby is vehemently arguing about a stolen chicken. Another individual is passed out cold, a ladle still clutched in their hand. A one-eyed dog gnaws on a bone beneath a table, acting as if it pays rent to be there. And this, my friend, is just the entrance. You have only just arrived, and already, it smells like a night to remember, or perhaps one you will desperately try to forget. As the heavy tavern door slams shut behind you, the darkness inside envelopes your senses like a damp wool blanket. Warm, a bit uncomfortable, and slightly suspicious. Your eyes slowly begin to adjust. Candlelight flickers against the soot-stained walls, casting dancing shadows that make even the chairs seem as if they are ready for a brawl. The hearth blazes fiercely in the far corner, serving as both a source of heat and an open flame hazard. Smoke drifts lazily through the air, not quite managing to escape through the chimney, which may, in fact, be obstructed by a dead crow. But what strikes you most forcefully is not the noise or the heat. It is the smell. The scent of a medieval tavern is less of an aroma and more of an emotional experience. The dominant notes are of stale ale, warm, sour, and liberally splashed across every available surface. Beneath that, you can detect the scent of sweat, years of it, from humans, horses, and possibly something mythical. Add to that a hint of moldy bread, damp straw, and a faint whisper of boiled onions, and you have a blend that no perfumer has ever dared to bottle. The tables are deeply carved with years of initials, crude drawings, and the scars of countless knives. They wobble with a peculiar, stubborn pride. The benches creak under the collective weight of muddy boots, thick cloaks, and questionable decisions. The floor, as promised, is genuine dirt, layered with straw that is intended to absorb spills, spit, and the occasional unconscious customer. You step cautiously. One wrong move and your foot might sink into something with a texture that is best left undescribed. The crowd itself forms a living, breathing organism. Boisterous laughter erupts in one corner, while in another, two men are heatedly disputing the price of a pig. A woman slams her mug down with such force that half of her drink spills, and no one even flinches. A man at the adjacent table stares at you with the dazed expression of someone who is either engaged in profound thought or has completely forgotten how chairs work. Someone nearby sneezes, causing the entire left side of the room to collectively lean away. And yet, despite this overwhelming assault on your modern sensibilities, there is something oddly welcoming here. The tavern is alive. It is rough, raw, and completely unfiltered, the medieval equivalent of a community hub, albeit one that is lacking in hygiene and features approximately 400% more shouting. You find your seat. It is a bit damp. It is probably cursed. But for now, it is undeniably yours. At first glance, the layout of the tavern appears as if someone arranged the furniture during an earthquake and then simply decided to leave it that way. There is no discernible blueprint, no designated bar area, and no cozy, secluded booths in the back. Just a sprawling, uneven distribution of tables, benches, barrels, and the occasional wooden crate that has been repurposed as a seat. Everything is either too close together or too far apart, depending on your current level of intoxication. The hearth serves as the sole true centerpiece. A large, open fire roaring against one wall, diligently providing warmth, light, and a substantial dose of indoor smoke inhalation. Around it, people cluster for comfort, like moths drawn to a flame, clutching their mugs. Those who are fortunate enough to secure the best seats monopolize the warmth, while those without them must rely on their ale to compensate. The bar, if it can even be called that, is typically just a thick wooden plank supported by two barrels, visibly sagging under the weight of jugs, mugs, and elbows. Behind it stands the tavern keeper, adeptly juggling tasks such as pouring drinks, shouting orders, and fixing a menacing glare on the one patron in the corner who still has not paid for last Tuesday's tab. There are no menus. You inquire about what is available and then brace yourself for the answer, which is usually a succinct ale, or shut up and wait. A narrow staircase, which is possibly original and definitely prone to giving splinters, leads to the upstairs rooms. If you squint, you might be able to discern a boot hanging from one of the railing posts. No one is entirely certain if it is decorative or a grim warning. Some taverns include a back room. It might serve as a storage area. It might be a venue for illicit gambling. Or it might be the place where the last person who insulted the barmaid was taken, never to be seen again. It is generally advisable not to inquire. The walls are perpetually stained with candle soot. The windows are covered with greasy cloth or animal hide. And every surface bears the thorough polish of countless elbows, boots, and spilled drinks from generations past. And perhaps a chicken. Somehow, despite the apparent chaos, or perhaps precisely because of it, the system functions. Everyone instinctively knows where to go, how to sit, when to shout, and when to duck. It is not organized, but it is undeniably alive. Every medieval tavern operates under the rule of a singular figure. And it is not the local lord or the tax collector. It is the tavern keeper. They may not wear a crown, but do not be deceived. This individual unequivocally runs the entire establishment. They are equal parts chef, server, accountant, impromptu babysitter, and enforcer of barroom justice. The tavern keeper is a one-person institution, and they tolerate no nonsense. If it is a man, he is likely built like a barrel with arms, grizzled, perpetually grumpy, and appears to be carved from cured meat and a series of regrettable decisions. If it is a woman, and it often is, she is sharper than a blacksmith's file and possesses the ability to silence an entire room with a single piercing look. Regardless of their gender, they have witnessed everything, heard far worse, and have undoubtedly cleaned blood out of the straw before breakfast. They greet regulars with a curt nod, strangers with palpable suspicion, and troublemakers with a swift tankard to the head. Behind the bar, they meticulously keep a mental tab on who has paid, who owes money, and who has consumed 3 too many Alesh, accomplishing all of this without ever jotting anything down. Because while literacy may have been rare in medieval times, the memory of a tavern keeper is terrifyingly precise. The tavern keeper dictates the entire atmosphere of the place. If they are in a good mood, the tavern hums with joviality. If they are in a foul mood, you would be wise to drink quickly and keep your jokes to yourself. They serve as the impartial referee in every argument, the judge in every cheating scandal, and the first person to seize a club when a fight inevitably erupts. You absolutely do not mess with the tavern keeper. They also possess an encyclopedic knowledge of everything that is happening in the town. Who is in debt, who is engaged in an affair, and who has arrived in town under a false name. If you need information, you bribe the barkeep. If you need protection, you sit near them. If you need a favor, you had better hope that you did not break a mug last week. Some tavern keepers have a helper, a son, a daughter, a spouse, or an orphan they have reluctantly adopted and now compel to carry barrels that are twice their own weight. These assistants dutifully deliver drinks, mop the floors, and do their best not to spill anything or get trampled by the intoxicated patrons. So, while the tavern may initially appear to be a chaotic mess, it is, in fact, a remarkably delicate ecosystem. And at its very center, commanding it all like a storm god in an apron, stands the one individual who ensures that the ale flows and the roof does not collapse into a full-blown riot, the tavern keeper. So, you finally settle onto a creaky bench, deftly dodging elbows and spilled stew. Your throat feels dry, your boots are damp, and it is time for the main event. The drink. But do not expect a wine list or a polished mug. This is a medieval tavern. Your choices are limited, lukewarm, and potentially life-threatening. Let us begin with the classic ale. It is unfiltered, unpasteurized, and typically brewed in the cramped back room where the dog probably sleeps. It is thick, cloudy, and often contains various floaties, bits of grain, yeast, or possibly a fragment of the previous customer's mustache. It is not cold because there is no ice, and you certainly do not inquire about how long it has been fermenting in the barrel. You simply drink it and hope for the best. Next up, we have mead, a wine made from honey. It sounds rather sophisticated, does it not? In reality, it is sweet, potent, and occasionally prone to explosive fermentation. If the tavern keeper has brewed it themselves, it might be delicious, or it might taste distinctly of regret and be venom. It is usually served to nobles, wedding guests, or that one persistent bard who insists on being compensated in either gold or mead. Then there is cider, which is crafted from apples that were either freshly picked or, more likely, have been lying on the ground for the past 3 weeks. It is sharp, tangy, and served in cracked mugs that may very well double as soup bowls by morning. It is the beverage of choice in regions that are rich in orchards, or for those who desire just enough alcohol to momentarily forget the pungent smell of the person who is seated beside them. Wine? Technically, yes. But unless you are in Southern Europe or the local nobility has graced the town with their presence, it is probably watered down, soured, and delivered with a side of palpable sarcasm. Fine wine is strictly reserved for lords, bishops, and the merchant who has just sold 12 crates of salt. And water? That is a remarkably bold choice, as half the time it is teeming with invisible pathogens. Boiling water requires precious fuel, and genuinely clean wells are a rarity. That is precisely why even children would consume ale. It was not about the intoxicating effect. It was about avoiding death from dysentery before reaching the age of 8. No one here is precisely measuring shots or meticulously crafting cocktails. You drink from mugs that are fashioned from wood, clay, or tin. Some of them may still contain the remnants of last night's stew. You raise your mug, take a cautious sniff, and then take a sip. It is warm, it is bitter, and yet, somehow it feels perfect. Because in the medieval tavern, if it is wet and will not kill you instantly, it is considered a fine vintage. So, you have survived the drink, but just barely. Now, your stomach is growling insistently, reminding you that you have not eaten since sunrise, and your last meal consisted primarily of barley and sadness. It is time to eat, but do not get your hopes up. There is no menu, no dedicated waiter, and absolutely no one asking if you have any dietary restrictions. You do not order food in a medieval tavern. You inquire about what is available, and then you simply hope that it is hot and only vaguely mysterious. The star of the tavern table is usually pottage, a thick stew that is made from whatever grains, vegetables, and questionable proteins were accessible that day. It has been simmering in the same pot since Monday, and today is Thursday. New ingredients are added to it daily, but nothing is ever removed. It is less of a meal and more of a culinary time capsule. If meat happens to be involved, then congratulations. It is probably rabbit, pigeon, or the unfortunate chicken that wandered a little too close to the fire. If it is game meat, it might be unexpectedly delicious, or it might be aged well beyond reason and seasoned liberally with desperation. Your bowl is crafted from either wood or clay. Your spoon is either your own, or you will have to resort to using your fingers. Most people would carry their own knife, so eating was a bring your own cutlery affair. And do not expect to find any napkins. You will have to make do with the sleeve of your tunic or a communal rag that has witnessed things it will never forget. Bread is also consistently available. It is tough, dark, and heavy, more of a blunt weapon than a food item. If it is soft, it was baked today. If it is hard, it dates back to last week. Either way, it pairs surprisingly well with cheese that smells faintly of an old boot and has begun to develop its own unique personality. Sometimes there is salted fish and sometimes there are pickled eggs. Occasionally, you might even find a tavern that is offering a special, which is simply a fancier way of announcing, we had an excess of this particular ingredient lying around. Flavor is often optional, and the texture is highly unpredictable. Still, in the flickering firelight, amidst the surrounding noise and with the warmth of the food in your hands, it is not bad. It is filling. It is hot. And if you refrain from contemplating too deeply about what might be floating in your bowl, it might even offer you a sense of comfort. You are not here for a gourmet dining experience. You are here to eat like a survivor. Once you have secured your seat, ideally one that is not currently being impaled by a knife, you begin to notice the true entertainment of the tavern. The people. A medieval tavern functions as the original social media feed. It is loud, chaotic, often half-true, and fully committed to rampant oversharing. To your left, a red-faced farmer, who is already deep into his fourth ale, is incessantly retelling the same story about his cow that gave birth sideways. He slaps you on the shoulder mid-sentence, as if you are a lifelong friend or a convenient replacement for the pig that he usually drinks with. At the far end of the room, a hooded stranger is sitting in the shadows, slowly nursing a drink. He could be a runaway monk, a notorious bandit, or simply someone who is acutely uncomfortable with eye contact. Regardless, you will not be engaging in small talk with him unless you are eager to disappear behind the stables. Near the hearth, a soldier in battered armor is regaling a captivated group with exaggerated tales of his battles. His narrative involves dragons, Frenchmen, and a talking sword. It is undeniably false, but no one cares. His tankard remains full, and his audience is roaring with laughter. A loud and sweaty merchant is shouting out the prices for his grain, which no one has inquired about. He pulls gold coins from his pouch with the casual abandon of a man who is practically begging to be robbed by midnight. A pair of locals are intensely playing dice on a warped table. One of them is clearly cheating. The other is aware of it and is allowing it to happen, likely reserving the confrontation for when his supply of ale has been depleted. A bard is strumming his lute in the corner, his voice cracking on the high notes of a love song that sounds suspiciously like something he has just improvised. But no one minds. He is wearing pants and he is in tune, which is already a significant improvement over last night's performer. Women move through the crowd. Some are tavern staff, while others are conducting their own business. They are sharp-eyed, self-assured, and absolutely not to be trifled with. They will flirt, laugh, or, if they are provoked, they might just knock your teeth in, depending on your tone. Children will occasionally dart between the legs of the patrons, skillfully snatching leftover pieces of bread or stray coins. No one intervenes. It is simply part of the established rhythm of the place. Everyone is observing, drinking, plotting, and pretending not to notice the man who is slumped under the table. This tavern is not just a place for food and drink. It is a living, breathing performance. And tonight, you are an integral part of the cast. Forget about lutes and ballads for a moment. The true soundtrack of a medieval tavern is not a structured song. It is a raw symphony of chaos. It begins with the rhythmic clink of mugs, dozens of them, slamming against the wooden surfaces in celebration, negotiation, or simply as an accidental misfire. Some of them clatter cheerfully, while others shatter completely. Both events are met with enthusiastic cheers from the crowd. Then comes the laughter. Deep, booming, belly laughter that sounds as if it has escaped from a wild boar. Most of it makes absolutely no sense. A farmer chuckles heartily at his own joke about hay. A knight giggles uncontrollably at the word pottage, and a monk wheezes spasmodically every time someone utters the word duck. You quickly learn not to question it. The voices of the patrons layer over one another, each one striving to be louder than the last, battling for dominance like a group of roosters in a coop. There is arguing, enthusiastic storytelling, shouting about taxes, and at least one individual who is misquoting scripture in order to win a wager. The bartender yells out orders while swatting at the persistent flies. A barmaid shouts defiantly at a man who has dared to touch her, and someone is incessantly repeating the phrase, "Another round," like a battle cry. In the corner, the bard, who is armed with a half-tuned lute that has 3 missing strings, is endlessly playing the same 4 chords, occasionally bursting into verses about lost love, unexpectedly found chickens, or noblemen who wore their pants backward. No one is genuinely listening unless he begins to sing about someone who is actually in the room, at which point the atmosphere becomes either highly entertaining or incredibly dangerous. Someone inevitably spills something. Someone burps with enough force to make the rafters tremble. And someone else tumbles off a bench and continues their conversation from the floor, as if it were a deliberate seating choice. In the background, dogs are barking. A goat is bleating. Yes, why is there a goat? And the chairs are scraping across the dirt floor like thunderclaps echoing within a wooden cavern. It is far from peaceful, yet it possesses an odd, compelling rhythm. Occasionally, the room will fall silent, not by choice but due to a sudden, inexplicable lull. It lasts for precisely 3 seconds. Then, someone heroically farts, and the chaotic music instantly resumes. This is not mere background noise. This is the very heartbeat of the tavern. Raw, rowdy, and relentlessly alive. If you listen closely enough, it begins to make a strange kind of sense, a harmony that is born from inherent disorder. And like the rest of the tavern, it only intensifies the longer you remain. Once the ale begins to flow freely and the stew starts to settle in your stomach, the tavern undergoes a transformation. It ceases to be merely a place for food and drink. It becomes a medieval casino, albeit one that is lacking in velvet ropes and features significantly more shouting. Gambling reigns as the sport of the evening, and everyone participates, from weathered soldiers to barefoot boys who are wielding borrowed dice. There is no designated dealer, no pit boss, and no formal regulations. Just a cracked wooden table, a handful of copper coins, and the unspoken promise that someone is about to lose their dignity. Dice are the preferred game of choice, and they are carved from bone, wood, or whatever readily available material was at hand. They clatter across the tabletops like rolling thunder, and each toss is followed by a medley of cheers, groans, and fervent accusations of witchcraft. No one genuinely trusts the dice, yet everyone uses them. Then there are cards if you happen to be in a more cultured part of town. They are thick, hand-painted, worn smooth at the edges, and invariably missing 1 or 2 from the deck. The rules of the game shift based on whoever happens to be explaining them. Sometimes you are striving for the highest number, while other times you are matching symbols or simply inventing the rules as you go. It is akin to poker, but with more frequent slapping. The wagers vary wildly, ranging from money to mugs to actual livestock. Yes, someone once wagered a goat. Someone else bet their boots. and another individual even wagered their own freedom for the night. Spoiler alert, he lost. The regulars are remarkably slick. They shuffle their cards quickly, roll the dice slowly, and smile a little too broadly. Is there cheating? Of course. Constitutes half of the entertainment. A concealed die here, a subtly marked card there, a mysteriously timed cough when the lucky player leans in. If you win big, you would be wise to buy a round for everyone, or you risk being physically assaulted. If you lose spectacularly, you simply smile, pretend that it was intentional, and slowly inch your chair back towards the door. Side games will also spontaneously erupt. Arm wrestling, intense thumb wars, and the perpetually popular who can drink the most without falling over? Competition. The victor earns enthusiastic applause from the crowd. The loser earns a night sleeping beneath the table and a headache that will persist until the next market day. But even when the rules are unclear and the stakes are absurd, the energy is undeniably addictive. Because in a medieval tavern, luck is not just a game. It is a high-stakes gamble with your purse, your pride, and quite possibly, your trousers. As the night deepens and the tavern fills with a humid warmth, a new form of performance begins to emerge. It is one that is crafted from words, music, and a great deal of confident nonsense. This is story time, medieval style. A bard clears his throat in the corner, gently plucking at a half-tuned lute, its strings squeaking like a pair of old boots. He is missing a few of his teeth, but none of his self-assurance. With a dramatic flourish, he launches into a ballad of heartbreak and heroism. A tale about a knight who tragically fell in love with a mermaid and nobly drowned while reciting poetry to her. No one in the tavern believes him, yet everyone listens anyway. That is the way it operates here. The truth is optional, but entertainment is paramount. Around the tables, others begin to join in. They are not professional bards, just patrons who have been emboldened by the ale and have a compelling tale to tell. One man swears that he once wrestled a bear and lived to drink about it. Another claims that he witnessed a witch transform a cow into a goat. And a third adamantly insists that he is distantly related to Charlemagne, through his mother's cousin's side of the family. Everyone's story begins with the phrase, "You won't believe this, but..." And they are entirely correct. We do not believe them, but we want to. Boasts metamorphose into ballads. Mishaps transform into myths. Someone tells a joke that is so terribly bad that it loops back around to being genuinely funny. Someone else recites a poem that they have likely plagiarized directly from a monk's scroll. The room responds with claps, hoots, or hurled pieces of bread, depending on the perceived quality or quantity of the performance. If you are fortunate, a traveling skald or minstrel might be passing through the town. These are professionals who journey from town to town, exchanging their music for coins, meals, and occasionally, a warm place to sleep indoors. Their songs are polished, their tales are lengthy, and their ability to incite a crowd is dangerously effective. But even they understand the golden rule of tavern tales. Never allow the facts to ruin a good story. In this smoke-filled room, with the fire crackling and the mugs sloshing, storytelling is more than just mere entertainment. It is a cherished tradition. It is a vital connection. It is how you forge friendships, acquire enemies, and occasionally find a lifelong drinking companion. By midnight, half of the tavern is passionately reenacting the story of the one-legged knight who bravely fought off 6 highwaymen with only a ladle. You laugh, you cheer, and you momentarily forget that it is all fabricated. Because in a medieval tavern, every liar becomes a legend, provided that their story is compelling enough. As the night deepens and the ale continues to flow, something distinct begins to shift in the air, a kind of boozy boldness. The bard is halfway through his 3rd song about unfaithful shepherdesses, and suddenly, everyone in the room feels a surge of romance. Welcome to medieval flirting. Subtlety has clearly abandoned the building. It begins with sustained eye contact, or at least one eye slightly squinting through a mead-induced haze. A man with only 2 remaining teeth leans across a bench and slurs, "My lady, your beauty burns brighter than the hearth itself." She responds by accurately hurling a bread crust at his forehead. The room erupts in cheers. Others attempt their luck more gently, offering refilled mugs, clumsy compliments, or awkward offers to help carry a bowl of stew to prevent it from spilling. Spoiler alert, it inevitably still spills. If you are a woman in the tavern, whether you are staff, a guest, or a traveling merchant, you are likely accustomed to fending off at least 3 aspiring poets, 2 challenging arm wrestlers, and 1 persistent man who is trying to impress you by precariously balancing a knife on his nose. Sometimes these attempts succeed, but more often than not, they result in a black eye or an empty purse. For those who are genuinely seeking companionship, the taverns offer more than just flirtation. Courtesans skillfully work the room with a practiced ease, discerning who possesses wealth, who possesses charm, and who will undoubtedly pass out before they reach the stairs. The transactions are discreet, but the underlying implications are abundantly clear. And jealous lovers? Oh, absolutely. Nothing ignites a tavern brawl faster than a stolen glance, a wandering hand, or a husband catching his wife laughing a little too heartily at the bard's off-color joke about bishops. Tables are overturned, mugs are swiftly weaponized, and a bench breaks in half, yet again. And yet, somewhere amidst all of this chaos, genuine sparks of connection do ignite. A shy baker's daughter and a traveling stonemason share a laugh over a communal bowl of stew. 2 intoxicated farmers bond over a mutual, profound hatred of turnips. A monk accidentally flirts with a nun. Love, or something that closely resembles it, manages to survive even in the rowdiest of corners. Because in the medieval tavern, romance is an equal blend of charm, chance, and the crucial ability to avoid falling face-first into your bowl mid-sentence. You might win a heart, you might earn a painful slap, but either way, you are certainly going to remember the encounter. Or at least you will hear about it in vivid detail the next morning. It was bound to happen. Perhaps someone accidentally spilled a drink. Or maybe someone accused another of cheating at dice. Perhaps 2 individuals simultaneously claimed the same bench, and neither of them was willing to back down. Or maybe someone uttered an unfortunate remark about another's mother, their favorite goat, or the quality of their soup. The specific reason for the fight does not truly matter. Suddenly, it is on. The tavern, which moments ago was a blur of music and the clinking of mugs, instantly transforms. A stool flies through the air, a tankard crashes to the floor, and someone shouts, "Hold my bread!" and lunges over a bench with all the grace of a drunken catapult. No one in the tavern appears to be surprised. In fact, most of the patrons do not even cease their drinking. A bar fight in the Middle Ages is not a rare occurrence. It is practically an anticipated feature of the evening. And while it might sound terrifying, it is usually more comically chaotic than it is genuinely deadly. People will swing wildly, often missing their targets, stumbling, and landing unceremoniously in someone's dinner. Hair is pulled, beards are grabbed, and shirts are torn. The tavern keeper roars like a battlefield general, wielding a ladle in one hand and a formidable club in the other. Occasionally, someone will spontaneously join in on the fray, having no idea why they are fighting, simply seeing the action and leaping in, fists first. Others will place informal bets on the outcome, cheer enthusiastically, or merely slide their mugs out of the immediate splash zone. And weapons? They are a rare sight. Most individuals are wise enough to avoid using them. Drawing a blade in a tavern can escalate a casual brawl into a full-blown tavern legend. And no one wants to be banned from the only place that serves hot food and warm ale. Eventually, someone will collapse to the floor and remain there. Someone else will stumble into a wall and decide that it is as good a place as any to sit and reflect on their life choices. The fight will dissipate as quickly as it began, like a tavern candle being blown out, abruptly and without any formal conclusion. And here is the peculiar part. Once it is over, it is genuinely over. The combatants are separated, their mugs are refilled, someone starts up a new song, and within 10 minutes, everyone is laughing again, including the person with the bleeding nose. There are no lingering grudges, no lawsuits, just a few bruises, some new stories to tell, and perhaps a fresh nickname, like One-Eyed Arnold or Bench-Breaker Bill. Because in a medieval tavern, a good fight is simply part of a good night. It is messy, ridiculous, and strangely unifying. And as long as no one sustains too serious of an injury, it is just another round of communal entertainment. So, the brawl has subsided, the bard has passed out mid-ballad, and your stomach is comfortably full of mystery stew and slightly fermented cider. It is time to go to sleep, or at least attempt to. But do not expect a plush feather bed and lavender-scented linens. This is a medieval tavern, and it is decidedly not a spa. If the tavern offers lodging, it is likely accessed via a creaky staircase. Upstairs, past the slanted floors and the beams that are low enough to test the durability of your skull, the rooms are small, cold, and definitively shared. Privacy is a non-existent concept. You will be sleeping shoulder to shoulder with strangers, some of whom will be snoring like church bells, while others will be loudly muttering in their dreams, speaking in languages you have never heard before. And the beds? Technically, yes, they exist. Most of them are straw-stuffed mattresses that are thin, lumpy, and teeming with what medieval folks would affectionately refer to as companions. You will lie down fully clothed, with your boots still on, and your dagger conveniently tucked under your pillow. Not for comfort, but as a defensive strategy. The blankets are communal, and so are the smells. And if someone has indulged in garlic earlier in the evening, and someone always has, its aroma will become an intimate part of your dreams. If you are too poor or too inebriated to afford an upstairs room, you will have to sleep downstairs. On a bench, under a table, or simply curled up in a corner by the hearth, perhaps nestled up beside a dog that may or may not belong to the tavern. You will likely be stepped on, probably sneezed on, and potentially used as a convenient footrest by one of the other patrons. The tavern never truly falls silent. Even after the last mug has been drained and the last fight has been haphazardly patched up, there is always someone muttering in their sleep, a log crackling in the fire, or a distant fart echoing through the rafters. And yet, somehow, you will manage to drift off to sleep. It is not comfortable and it is not clean, but it feels safe enough. The warmth from the dying fire wards off the worst of the cold. The tavern keeper maintains a vigilant watch with one eye open and a club within easy reach, and the pervasive noise of the tavern transforms into its own unique lullaby. Familiar, profoundly human, and vibrantly alive. You will awaken with a sore neck, a parched mouth, and a questionably acquired bruise. But for a few hours, you will have slept in the company of travelers, rogues, farmers, and fools. There will have been no kings and no silence, just snoring, straw, and the faint hope that your boots will still be there when the morning arrives. Dawn creeps in like an uninvited guest, filtering a pale light through the cracks in the shutters and prodding at your eyelids with a relentless persistence. The tavern has transformed overnight. It is not necessarily quieter, but it is quieter in a defeated sort of way. You manage to open one eye. Someone's boot is resting squarely on your chest. Someone else is sleep mumbling about sheep taxes. The bard is snoring loudly under a table, clutching his lute as if it were a cherished lover. A chicken is hopping casually across the floor, pecking at yesterday's discarded bread crusts. No one questions its presence. The fire in the hearth has dwindled down to just embers, leaving the room cold and smoky. A few of the patrons begin to stir, groaning like wounded warriors after battles that were fought entirely within their own skulls. One man sits up, surveys his surroundings, and then promptly lies back down, having concluded that today is simply not worth the effort. The tavern keeper is already awake, of course, clattering mugs together, sweeping the straw into fresh piles, and reheating something in a pot that emits a scent that is simultaneously inviting and slightly vengeful. They cast a sharp glance at the inert forms that are lying on the floor, and then they strike a ladle against a mug, which sounds like a morning bell from hell. Up or out is your stark wake-up call. There is no breakfast buffet awaiting you. If you are lucky, there is more pottage, which is now even thicker and more mysterious than last night's offering. The bread is reheated, the ale is watered down, and no one has the energy or the inclination to complain. Some of the patrons simply dunk their heads into a barrel of rainwater that is sitting outside and declare that to be clean living. You check your pouch, 2 coins and a single button. That is better than you expected. And your boots? They are still here. One of them bears a distinct bite mark, but they are undeniably yours. It is a small victory. A few new faces begin to trickle in, Early risers, weary travelers, and diligent workers who are in need of a restorative drink before they have to confront their livestock, their taxes, or, even worse, their neighbors. The tavern slowly begins to stir once more, like a great beast that is gradually awakening. Someone starts to retell a story from last night. It has already changed, of course. Now, there were 2 fights, and the bar song miraculously summoned a ghost. Everyone nods in solemn agreement, as if it were the gospel truth. The night was a chaotic blur. The morning is groggy, grimy, and undeniably tinged with a sense of regret. And yet, you find yourself smiling, because somehow you have survived it all. By now, you have experienced the sweat, the smoke, and the sticky ale beneath your boots. You have survived the shouting, the clumsy flirting, the mystery pottage, and possibly even a flying bench. And through all of that, one profound truth has become clear. The medieval tavern was far more than just a drinking establishment. It was the very beating heart of the community. In a world that was devoid of phones, newspapers, or social networks, the tavern served as the primary conduit for news. A merchant who was arriving from the coast could share tantalizing gossip from a foreign port. A soldier could vividly describe the realities of war from the front lines. And a bard could sing songs that would symbolically stitch the people together, even if the lyrics capriciously changed every single night. This was a vital place for connection. Farmers would drink alongside skilled craftsmen. Pilgrims would share their meager bread with shrewd thieves. And strangers would quickly become friends, or at least reliable drinking buddies, often before the second round of drinks was even poured. Here, the social classes would blur, rumors were born, crucial alliances were forged, and grudges were either buried, or perhaps further inflamed, depending on how the dice happened to roll. The tavern also served as a bustling center where business was conducted. Deals were struck, and contracts were sealed with a simple handshake over splintered tables and spilled cider. It functioned as a court, a confessional, and a vibrant theater stage, all at the same time. You could find a job, lose your purse, get married, or ignite a bitter feud, all in a single evening. And it offered something else, too. Something that you could not purchase at the market or pray for in a chapel. Profound relief. Relief from the biting cold, from the relentless labor, and from the endless seriousness of simply trying to survive medieval life. For a few precious hours, you could sit near a crackling fire, listen to a terrible joke, sing an even worse song, and forget, just for a brief moment, how harsh the outside world truly was. Even if the ale was lukewarm, the bed was itchy, and the food contained more bones than broth, the tavern provided a comforting sense of being vibrantly alive, surrounded by other living souls. And in an age where everything, from rampant disease to devastating war to a brutally sharp winter, could claim you without any warning, that feeling was no small thing. So, when you stepped into a medieval tavern, you were not just purchasing a drink. You were buying a sense of belonging, a captivating story, and perhaps, if the floor was not too crowded, a safe place to sleep where the fire still burned. Because long before the advent of cafes, pubs, and coffee houses, there was the tavern. Loud, dirty, honest, and absolutely unforgettable. Before she became the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, immortalized in a limestone bust with high cheekbones and a gaze frozen in serene confidence, Nefertiti was a woman cloaked in profound mystery. Her name literally means, "The beautiful one has come," but no one knows precisely where she came from. Some scholars believe that she was the daughter of a powerful Egyptian official named Ai, and possibly even Akhenaten's own sister. Others contend that she was a foreign princess, sent to Egypt as part of a strategic marriage alliance. Her origins remain a subject of debate, but her undeniable influence is clear. Nefertiti appears in the historical record with the suddenness of a lightning strike. Brilliant, transformative, and entirely unexpected. She entered the life of Akhenaten not as a passive queen, but as an equal partner in a reign that would fundamentally shake the deeply entrenched religious and cultural foundations of Egypt. Together, they would dismantle centuries of tradition, discard the vast pantheon of gods, and elevate the sun disk, Aten, as the one and only true deity. It was a radical, almost heretical move, and Nefertiti was not merely observing from the throne. She was actively leading ceremonies, making sacred offerings, and was even depicted in art smiting her enemies, a role that was typically reserved for male pharaohs. Unlike other queens, who were often relegated to the background, Nefertiti was omnipresent. She appears in more artwork from the Amarna period than even Akhenaten himself. In these depictions, she is not cloaked in an air of subservience. She stands tall, sometimes larger than life, quite literally holding power in her hands. And in a society where the pharaohs were considered to be divine, her close proximity to Akhenaten, both spiritually and politically, suggested something more profound. Perhaps she was not just a queen, perhaps she was a co-ruler. But this remarkable ascent was not without its tensions. Egypt was unprepared for such an upheaval. The old priesthood deeply resented the loss of their traditional gods and temples. The capital was controversially moved to a new city, Akhetaten, which is known today as Amarna, severing the ties with the established old ways. And through it all, Nefertiti remained a central figure, her image etched into the stone walls, and her name sung in the hymns to the sun. Yet, for all of her profound visibility in life, her death is a complete vanishing act. There is no tomb, no confirmed body, and no definitive end to her story, just an inexplicable silence. It is as if history, after showcasing her brilliance, suddenly chose to look away. And that, perhaps, is precisely where her enduring legend truly begins. To comprehend the remarkable ascent of Nefertiti, you must first understand the man who revolutionized everything, the pharaoh Akhenaten. He was not born with that name. He was originally Amenhotep IV, a prince who was inheriting a 1,000-year legacy of gods and ingrained tradition. But something fundamentally shifted within him. Some attribute it to a moment of divine inspiration, while others suggest that it was a form of madness. When he became king, he controversially turned his back on the mighty god Ammonius and declared a new, singular truth. There was only one deity who was worthy of worship, the sun itself, the Aten. This was not merely a religious shift. It was an earthquake that fractured the very bedrock of Egyptian civilization. Imagine a society that had been meticulously built around temples, powerful priests, and intricate rituals being told overnight that their gods were false and their sacred forms of worship were obsolete. Akhenaten did not just advocate for monotheism, he ruthlessly enforced it. The temples of Ammonius were abruptly shut down. His name was systematically chiseled off of monuments. Ancient statues were smashed, and entire cities were abandoned. In their place, Akhenaten constructed something entirely new, Akhetaten, a city that was exclusively dedicated to the Aten, where the sun would rise directly between the cliffs and bathe the city in its sacred light. And throughout this radical transformation, Nefertiti stood steadfastly at his side, not as a silent consort, but as a full and active participant. In the reliefs of the period, she is consistently shown worshipping the Aten with the same profound reverence as Akhenaten. Their daughters are frequently depicted with them, their heads tilted up towards the radiant sun. It was a family portrait that was unlike anything that had been seen in Egyptian art before or since. Intimate, revolutionary, and deeply personal. Even the artistic style of the period underwent a dramatic change. It was no longer stiff and formal, but fluid, exaggerated, and sometimes even strikingly intimate. There were depictions of the king and queen kissing, playfully interacting with their children, and praying in soft, flowing robes beneath the life-giving sun. Nefertiti was omnipresent in this new world. At times, her presence even seemed to overshadow that of her husband. Some historians believe that she wielded genuine political power, perhaps even serving as a co-regent. There are inscriptions that refer to her as Neferneferutin, a name that some scholars believe she adopted when she began to rule in her own right. It remains unclear if Akhenaten shared the throne with her out of love, strategic calculation, or sheer necessity, but one thing was evident. Without Nefertiti, this profound religious revolution may not have endured for as long as it did. But revolutions are inherently fragile. The old gods do not take kindly to being replaced. And the common people, they were quietly watching, patiently waiting for the old order to inevitably return. By the height of her influence, Nefertiti had transcended the role of a mere queen. She had evolved into an icon, symbolizing not just profound beauty, but also divine femininity and unyielding royal power. Egypt had witnessed powerful queens before, figures like Amos Nefertari and Hatshepsut, but Nefertiti's presence felt uniquely different. She was not ruling from the shadows or seizing power through military conquest. She was actively reshaping the spiritual and cultural fabric of Egypt alongside her husband, in real time, as a living goddess. She bore Akhenaten's 6 daughters, Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankhesempaten, and others, all of whom were frequently depicted in intimate family scenes beneath the life-giving rays of the Aten. Curiously, no sons were ever definitively confirmed. In a kingdom that was obsessed with maintaining its lineage, this presented both a political challenge and a historical mystery. Was it simply fate, or was there something else at play? Some have suggested that Akhenaten may have fathered sons with other wives, or even more controversially, with Nefertiti herself, which has fueled modern speculation and a range of uncomfortable theories, from the purely speculative to the openly salacious. What is certain is that motherhood was central to her public image. In the art of the period, Nefertiti is tenderly portrayed cradling her children, their tiny arms reaching up to touch her cheeks. These are not stiff, cold statues. They are vibrant, living moments that have been captured in stone. Intimate, emotional, and radiant. In an age where the pharaohs were often perceived as distant gods, Nefertiti's portrayal as a nurturing mother softened the divine, making it more human and relatable. Yet, there was another, far more powerful side to her iconography. In multiple depictions, Nefertiti is shown wearing the blue crown, which was typically reserved exclusively for male rulers. She is shown actively smiting her enemies, confidently riding in chariots, and making offerings to the gods without Akhenaten by her side. These were not mere symbolic gestures. This was a queen who was performing the sacred duties that were traditionally assigned to a king. It suggests a quiet but radical truth. Nefertiti may have been preparing for more than just a partnership. She may have been actively preparing to rule as a pharaoh in her own right. Historical whispers suggest that after Akhenaten's health began to decline, possibly due to genetic disorders or the immense stress of his reforms, Nefertiti assumed a greater responsibility for governing. But this is precisely where the historical record begins to fade. In the final years of Akhenaten's reign, she abruptly vanishes from the public eye. There is no fanfare, no funeral inscriptions, and no confirmed burial site. Did she die young? Did she fall from power? Or was she on the verge of becoming something even greater than a queen? Something that history attempted and ultimately failed to erase. One day, Nefertiti was omnipresent. Her image was etched into the walls, she was praised in the hymns, and she was ruling alongside a revolutionary pharaoh. And then, like a breath that is carried away on the desert wind, she simply vanished. No ancient Egyptian queen had ever maintained such a high public profile. Yet, around year 12 of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, the historical records become eerily silent. Her name disappears from the inscriptions. Her image fades from the art. There is no tomb, no death announcement, and no scene of her being mourned. For a woman who was so central to the profound cultural upheaval of Egypt, her sudden absence is more than just strange. It is a gaping black hole in the fabric of history. So what exactly happened to her? One prevalent theory suggests the simplest explanation. She died. Childbirth was an inherently risky endeavor, even for royalty. Nefertiti's second daughter, Meketaten, also disappears from the records around this same period, which possibly indicates a dual tragedy. A mother and her daughter, both lost in the same dark moment. But if that were the case, why was there no elaborate funeral, no grand tribute, and no dedicated temple to her memory? This was a woman who was revered like a goddess. A quiet, unrecorded death simply does not fit the script. Others have proposed something that is far more political. Perhaps Nefertiti fell from favor. The tides within the royal court may have turned against her. Akhenaten, who was becoming increasingly isolated, could have sidelined her, possibly in favor of another consort. Some scholars have suggested that a co-ruler named Smenkhare, an enigmatic figure who briefly appears in the historical record, may have replaced her. Was this a male heir, a half-brother, or was Smenkhare actually Nefertiti herself, ruling under a new name? That is the most electrifying theory of all. That Nefertiti did not disappear at all. She simply transformed. Evidence suggests that someone who was named Nefertiti ruled in the final years of Akhenaten's reign. This individual used feminine grammar in their inscriptions and even referred to Akhenaten as her beloved husband. Could this have been Nefertiti finally crowned as a pharaoh in her own right? If so, she would have joined the ranks of the rarest figures in Egyptian history, a female king, much like Hatshepsut before her. But even this tantalizing theory dissolves into the sands of uncertainty. The reign of Nefertiti abruptly ends. And then, a more familiar name emerges from the shadows. Tutankhaten, who would later be known as Tutankhamun, a child king who would decisively reverse his parents' religious reforms and restore the old gods to their former glory. If Nefertiti did indeed reign alone, it was for only a brief period. And if she was Smenkhare or Nefertiti, she ruled as a ghost queen, visible only in subtle hints, half-carved cartouches, and broken relics. She is a profound puzzle that is missing its central piece. And so, just as suddenly as she arrived, the most powerful woman in Egypt seemingly vanishes from the historical record. But her legend, that was just beginning to take shape. As the dust of Amarna began to settle, a new figure emerged from the shadows. A boy king, barely old enough to firmly grasp a scepter. His name was Tutankhaten, and he would later be famously changed to Tutankhamun. He would go on to become the most renowned pharaoh in the world, not for his achievements in life, but for the breathtaking treasures that were discovered in his largely untouched tomb. But what truly matters here is this: who was his mother? The historical records are frustratingly silent on this crucial detail. Some scholars have argued that Nefertiti was his stepmother. Others have speculated that she may have been his biological mother, citing artistic depictions and the timing of events, which seems to place him as a young child during her final public appearances. If Nefertiti truly was the mother of Tutankhamun, it would provide a logical explanation for many things. His early reign was clearly guided by someone with a steady, experienced hand, and his momentous decision to reverse his father's controversial religious revolution may not have been entirely his own initiative. And that is where the intrigue deepens even further. Who was actually steering the ship during Tutankhamun's fragile regency? The boy king was only about 9 years old when he ascended to the throne. A mere child cannot single-handedly restore a sprawling religious empire. Someone was undoubtedly operating behind the scenes. Someone who was deeply experienced in court politics, religious affairs, and public symbolism. Could it have been Nefertiti, subtly ruling from the shadows? Or was it the powerful high priest Ai, who was possibly her father? Or perhaps it was both of them, working collaboratively to erase the chaos of Amarna and meticulously return Egypt to its revered old gods. One of the more compelling pieces of evidence comes from a golden shrine that was discovered within Tutankhamun's tomb. It depicts a woman anointing the young king, a woman with features that are eerily similar to those of Nefertiti. If that indeed was her, it would suggest that she may not have vanished at all, but rather remained at the very heart of power, albeit in a more discreet capacity. Still, without a definitively named tomb, and without a confirmed mummy, we are left with nothing but tantalizing fragments. If she did indeed guide Tutankhamun, her fingerprints are everywhere, but her name is conspicuously absent, scrubbed from the temples, and deliberately omitted from the king lists, as though someone had actively sought to erase the memory of a woman who had once ruled like a god. And yet, the irony is profound. The eventual fame of Tutankhamun would inadvertently resurrect her image, because in the global search for his story, the world inevitably stumbled upon hers. For someone who stood at the very epicenter of Egypt's most radical era, as a queen, a priestess, and possibly even a pharaoh, Nefertiti left behind no confirmed tomb. Not a single monument bears her death rites. There is no sarcophagus, no funerary mask, and no inscription that whispers her final words to the gods. It is as though she simply evaporated into thin air. This profound absence has perplexed Egyptologists for over a century. In a culture that was utterly obsessed with the afterlife, where every noble was meticulously embalmed, mummified, and interred with detailed instructions for the soul's perilous journey. How could one of the most powerful women in Egyptian history simply be lost? Theories abound. One possibility suggests that she was buried hastily and without any formal ceremony during the tumultuous waning years of the Amarna period. Perhaps her radical religious legacy had made her a dangerous figure in the eyes of the new, more traditional regime. Her tomb may have been deliberately dismantled, and her name defaced, as part of the sweeping effort to eradicate the memory of Akhenaten's perceived heresy. After all, the return to the traditional gods was swift and decisive, and vengeance that was expressed through stone-cut hieroglyphs was a common practice. Another, even more tantalizing theory suggests that her tomb was never truly lost. It was simply misidentified or remains cunningly hidden from view. Some researchers have proposed that she lies within the Valley of the Kings itself, concealed behind the walls of Tutankhamun's own tomb. In 2015, radar scans of KV-62, the famed tomb of King Tut, indicated the possible presence of hidden chambers. Was Nefertiti buried just inches away, sealed off and forgotten beneath layers of history and gold? That idea captivated the world's imagination. A queen who was sleeping just beyond our reach. Egyptologists held their collective breath. But further scans yielded inconclusive results. Subsequent excavations slowed, funding eventually dried up, and once again, Nefertiti retreated into the realm of myth. Yet her absence remains profoundly loud. We possess her images, dozens, perhaps even hundreds of them, her likeness exquisitely captured in stone and pigment. Her iconic bust, which is now housed in Berlin, still gazes out with an unfathomable grace across the museum glass, as if she possesses some knowledge that we do not, as if she is patiently waiting for something. Every year, new archaeological digs continue in Amarna and the Valley of the Kings. And every year, new whispers begin to stir. Could a newly discovered, sealed chamber finally yield her secrets? Could a cartouche that has been unearthed from the forgotten sand finally reveal her true name? Or is she destined to remain an eternal riddle, an unfinished sentence in the grand story of Egypt? If history attempted to bury her, it did not succeed for long, because the relentless search for Nefertiti never truly ceased. It only deepened. If her tomb was never found and her body was never definitively identified, why do we still remember Nefertiti with such clarity? The answer lies behind a pane of museum glass, bathed in the soft lights of Berlin's Neues Museum, a meticulously painted limestone sculpture that has captivated the world since its dramatic rediscovery in 1912. It is the bust of Nefertiti. She gazes forward with an unparalleled sense of poise and serenity, her long neck gracefully elegant, her distinctive blue crown prominent, and her features so exquisitely refined that they almost appear to be modern. One of her eyes remains unfinished, perhaps intentionally left that way, or perhaps it was a forgotten detail during the sculptor's final days in his workshop. Yet, even in its incompleteness, she is timeless and unforgettable. The bust was unearthed by the German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt in the ruins of the sculptor Thutmose's studio at Amarna. When he brushed away the dust and revealed her face, he instantly recognized the profound significance of his discovery. In his diary, he simply wrote, "No use describing it. You have to see it." And once the world did indeed see it, Nefertiti transcended her role as a mere historical figure and became a global symbol of beauty, power, and ancient enigma. But even her iconic bust is not without its controversy. Germany acquired the artifact during an era of less stringent antiquities laws, and for decades, Egypt has been consistently requesting its repatriation. To the Egyptians, she rightfully belongs at home, in the land whose sun once touched her skin, where she stood beneath the sacred rays of the Aten. However, Germany has steadfastly refused to return her. They claim that her extreme fragility renders her unsafe for travel. Others have suggested that it is primarily a matter of prestige. Nefertiti draws immense crowds to the museum. She is, after all, their cultural Mona Lisa. Still, her enduring presence, regardless of her current location, has profoundly altered how the world perceives the women of the ancient world. She was not merely a passive beauty. Her bust captures something that is regal, assertive, and almost defiantly challenging. She appears as someone who harbored deep secrets, made pivotal decisions, and irrevocably changed the course of empires. And indeed, she did. It is truly remarkable how a single sculpture, so delicate and silent, can so powerfully resurrect someone who was seemingly lost to the depths of time. We may never locate her tomb. We may never definitively know how she died. But through this timeless bust, Nefertiti has achieved something truly extraordinary. She has become immortal, not through gold and glory, but through the enduring power of human memory. The face may be still, but the story that it so eloquently tells, that story continues to speak louder than ever across the centuries. Nefertiti's story exists somewhere between solid stone and profound silence, between what we definitively know and what we desperately wish to believe. Few figures in ancient history have inspired such relentless fascination and such pervasive mystery. She is a walking paradox, one of the most extensively documented women of her time, yet still largely unknowable. Over the centuries, she has been imagined in countless different ways. To some, she was a goddess in human form, the living embodiment of divine beauty. To others, she was a political mastermind, the true force behind the throne, and perhaps even the throne itself. Some have portrayed her as a tragic, romantic figure, hopelessly lost amidst the sands of a revolution. Others have depicted her as ambitious, even ruthless, elegantly navigating a collapsing empire with a chilling sense of calculation. But what do we truly know for certain? We know that she was far more than just a royal wife. Her visual imagery consistently rivals that of the kings of her time. Her prominent presence during religious rites, grand royal ceremonies, and even scenes of battle reveals a woman who was not simply standing beside power, but actively wielding it. In a deeply patriarchal world, she carved out her own unique space, not through open rebellion, but through sheer presence, unwavering poise, and a masterful command of the visual and spiritual language of her era. We know that she was central to one of history's most audacious religious shifts. While Akhenaten may have conceived of the monotheistic sun cult, it was Nefertiti who profoundly embodied it. She served as the human face of a divine ideal, the vital bridge between the Aten above and the people down below. She did not just serve the gods. She became their very image. And we know that after her mysterious disappearance, her memory was almost completely erased. The intense backlash against Akhenaten's regime swept her name into oblivion. Her statues were systematically smashed, her inscriptions were defaced, and her pivotal role in history was intentionally buried. Yet here we are 3,000 years later, still whispering her name. Why is that? Because myth possesses an uncanny ability to survive where hard facts sometimes cannot. Because when a woman becomes both an iconic figure and an enduring enigma, she slips into a space where the relentless march of time cannot reach her. Because sometimes, the unanswered questions echo far louder than the definitive answers. And maybe, just maybe, that is precisely how Nefertiti intended it to be remembered but not fully explained, to be admired but not contained, to live forever not as a woman who is confined to a single tomb, but as a queen of endless speculation. More than 3 millennia have passed since Nefertiti last walked beneath the scorching sun of Egypt, yet her profound shadow still stretches across our modern world. It is etched in the glass of museums, whispered through the halls of academia, and vividly splashed across the pages of novels and the screens of documentaries. Unlike most other historical figures, she has not faded into the distant past. If anything, her presence only grows larger with the passage of time. There is something utterly irresistible about her, and it is not solely her beauty, for we have seen beauty before. It is the enduring mystery that surrounds her. The deliberate blank spaces in her biography feel like a challenge, a subtle taunt, as if she is daring us to try and understand her, knowing full well that we never truly will. And in that intriguing way, she has become something more than merely historical. She has become archetypal. Every new generation reinterprets Nefertiti in its own image. In the early 20th century, she was often portrayed as an exotic queen, mysterious yet submissive. During the feminist movement, she powerfully emerged as a symbol of female authority, an ancient ruler who was tragically lost to patriarchal erasure. In contemporary media, she is celebrated as a style icon, a formidable African queen, a shrewd political player, and even a possible pharaoh. She has experienced 1,000-second lives, not through irrefutable facts, but through the boundless power of the human imagination. But perhaps that is the most fitting afterlife of all. In ancient Egypt, immortality was not solely about meticulous mummification. It was fundamentally about enduring memory. If your name was spoken aloud, your image was seen, and your story was retold, you would continue to live on. You could traverse the serene field of reeds, dine with the gods, and truly exist beyond the confines of death. Nefertiti, whether by intentional design or by mere chance, has undeniably achieved that. Her name is spoken on continents all across the globe. Her face is recognized as one of the most iconic in all of human history, and her story, though fragmented, continues to command global attention. So, in a profound sense, her greatest legacy was not carved into a tomb or sealed beneath the desert stone. It was this persistent, enduring curiosity that she left behind. She left a perfect mystery, a life that was half seen, half erased, and entirely unforgettable. And perhaps that was her ultimate act of power. Not just to rule an empire, not just to shape a religion or raise royal daughters, but to become timeless. Nefertiti, the beautiful one who has come, never truly departed from this world. She remains here in our questions, our wonder, and our innate human need to remember the women that history has deliberately attempted to forget. She lives on, not in gold or glory, but in the eternal act of being diligently searched for. And what could possibly be more immortal than that? In China, where the clouds often hang low and the wind murmurs softly through the bamboo groves, a dragon lies coiled. But this is no mythical creature, no fire-breathing beast of ancient legend. This particular dragon is composed of earth and stone, meticulously carved by centuries of calloused hands and a patient, visionary effort. It is the Longji rice terraces, affectionately known to the locals as the dragon's backbone, and its graceful curves ripple across the mountainside like a set of majestic scales, shimmering with water, vibrant rice, and a deep, ancient pride. From a distance, the terraces bear an uncanny resemblance to a sleeping creature. The hills ripple with a rhythmic precision, each layer rising and falling like the sinew of a living form. But as you approach closer, you will discover something that is even more vibrantly alive. Water flows in soft whispers along meticulously dug channels. Tender rice seedlings flutter gently in the breeze. And at dawn, the morning mist gracefully drapes the landscape like breath rising from the dragon's nostrils. These terraces were not constructed in a hurry. Their remarkable story began over 700 years ago, when the Zhuang and Yao people, ethnic minorities with profound ties to these mountains, chose to meticulously tame the steep slopes rather than abandon them. Flat land was scarce, machinery was non-existent, and so they gazed upon the formidable mountain and posed a simple, existential question to themselves. How do we sustain ourselves here? The answer to that question unfolded over the course of generations. Armed with little more than rudimentary stone tools and bamboo baskets, they painstakingly carved the hills, inch by inch, year after year. With each level that was meticulously constructed, they not only shaped the land, they also taught it to breathe in harmony with them. Rainfall was transformed into a precious resource. The daunting slope became a source of sustenance. And rice, the very staple of their lives, began to flourish where gravity had once reigned supreme. And over time, the terraces began to resemble a majestic dragon in repose. Powerful, eternal, and sacred. This was more than just mere agriculture. It was a profound harmony, a silent, enduring pact between humans and nature. No part of the mountain was wasted, and no part was violently forced to conform. Instead, the people worked with the earth, shaping it in graceful curves and gentle swells, listening to the murmuring of the wind, and following the natural flow of the water. Today, the dragon's backbone continues to feed entire villages. But more importantly, It stands as a powerful testament to what unwavering patience can build. In a world that is constantly racing forward, here lies a dragon that was never pursued, only meticulously carved. Layer by layer, dream by dream. To walk among the Longji rice terraces is to step into a world that has been meticulously carved by sheer persistence. There are no illusions here, no machine tracks scarring the earth, and no corporate survey markers. What stretches across these mountains are the undeniable fingerprints of human endurance. Every graceful curve, every subtle slope, and every drop of water has been meticulously arranged, stone by stone, by hands that intuitively understood the very pulse of the land. Centuries ago, when the Zhuang and Yao peoples first gazed upon these steep and unforgiving hillsides, they did not perceive them as insurmountable obstacles. They saw them as a profound opportunity. The fertile valleys down below were already claimed, but high up here, amidst the rugged peaks, there was a possibility, if only they could compel the earth to cooperate with them. With no heavy machinery at their disposal, they began their monumental task, using rudimentary wooden shovels, stone hoes, and baskets that were filled with mud and rubble, which they carried tirelessly on their backs that had been worn smooth by the passage of time. Slowly and steadily, the terraces began to take shape, forming horizontal veins across the face of the mountain, held securely in place by hand-stacked stone walls. These were not accidental cuts that were made into the slope. They were meticulously calculated. Each level had to be perfectly balanced, not only to retain the water but also to seamlessly transfer it from one tier to the next without any waste. A single miscalculation could lead to the collapse of an entire section of the terraces. If a slope was too steep, the water would rush downwards uncontrollably. If it was too flat, it would stagnate. So they measured not with rulers, but with generations of accumulated intuition. The children learned from their elders, and the elders diligently observed the changing of the seasons. And the mountain, in time, yielded, not with surrender, but with a quiet sense of trust. And the remarkable result of their efforts? A landscape that seemingly defies nature by flowing effortlessly with it. From the base of the valley to the cloud-kissed peaks, these terraces ascend like an impossibly grand spiral staircase that is reaching for the sky. They mirror the topography of the land with an inherent elegance that makes it appear as if the mountain itself had organically grown them. But no, the mountain did not sculpt these curves. Humans did, with no engines, no concrete, and no formal degrees in architecture. Just countless hours of hard work, persistent trial and error, and the unwavering belief that the land, no matter how steep it may be, can be made to sustain life. Today, the terraces remain fully functional. They are still meticulously farmed, still carefully repaired, and still profoundly respected. There are no bulldozers and there are no shortcuts. The old ways persist, not because they are stubbornly resistant to the future, but because they have proven something that is rare and invaluable. That tradition, when it is deeply rooted enough, can indeed outlast every storm. If the dragon's backbone represents the muscle and bone of the landscape, then the water is undeniably its lifeblood. It flows quietly, without the aid of pumps or engines, tracing the ancient channels that gracefully descend from the mountaintop springs into every single terrace down below. This intricate hydraulic choreography is no mere accident. It represents the secret life of the terraces, the fundamental reason for their centuries-long endurance. At the highest elevations of the mountain, rainwater and natural springs are meticulously collected in narrow ditches and earthen canals. From there, gravity becomes the farmer's silent and efficient ally. The water descends gently through terrace after terrace, pooling softly in each field before gracefully spilling over into the next. This fluid, seamless design ensures that every patch of rice receives precisely what it requires. No more and no less. There are no complex valves, and there are no electronic switches. The control of the water resides in subtle gates that are crafted from stone or wood, and they are adjusted by hand, out of ingrained habit. If one terrace were to overflow, it would risk flooding the one below it. If one were to develop a leak, a drought may consequently follow. And so the villagers, who are the diligent guardians of this delicate system, traverse the narrow ridges on a daily basis, meticulously checking, making fine adjustments, and attentively listening to the rhythmic sound of the flowing water. It is less like conventional farming and more akin to playing a complex musical instrument. If you play one wrong note, the entire song is thrown off key. But the water does more than just nourish the rice. It also beautifully mirrors the sky. In the spring, when the terraces are first deliberately flooded, the paddies transform into vast sheets of glass. They flawlessly reflect the clouds, the sun, and even the stars on a clear night. Visitors to the area often describe the sight as being surreal, as if the mountain itself has become a living mirror, perfectly reflecting both heaven and earth. Then the summer arrives. The water thickens with the vibrant stalks of green rice. The mesmerizing reflection of the sky fades away, replaced by the dynamic movement of the rippling rice plants, swaying gently in the wind like an emerald sea. In the autumn, the water gleams through the rich gold of the ripened grain. And in the winter, when the farming ceases, snow and frost gracefully replace the flowing current. The dragon sleeps, but the channels remain, like quiet veins that are patiently awaiting the return of the spring. Time itself flows differently here. It is measured not in hours, but in moisture, by the first subtle trickle of the mountain thaw, by the resonant sound of the returning frogs, and by the rich scent of the wet soil. In a world that counts time in seconds, the people of Longji still measure it in seasons and in individual drops of water. And so the dragon lives on, not in fire and flight, but in the gentle ripples of water that are pulsing softly through a living masterpiece of stone and soil. Spring in the Longji Mountains begins not with the bursting of blossoms, but with the vital presence of water. As the snow melts from the higher peaks, countless streams begin to trickle downward, breathing life into the patiently waiting terraces. The mirror-like paddies are meticulously prepared. The dragon stirs, and the people meticulously ready themselves for the ancient ritual that binds them to every generation that came before them, the planting of the very first seed. There is no grand announcement, only a quiet, deliberate movement. The farmers, both young and old, rise with the morning mist. They walk barefoot along the narrow ridges, their straw hats pulled down low over their eyes, and their baskets balanced expertly on their backs. The air is thick with the earthy scent of the soaked soil and the crisp mountain wind. The paddies, which were deliberately flooded just days earlier, now shimmer like polished jade. This is not a task for machines. It never has been, and it never will be. Each delicate rice seedling, which has been carefully nurtured in the nursery beds, is meticulously transplanted by hand, one by one in precise, straight lines. The workers step into the cold water and gently press the tender stalks into the soft mud with their nimble fingers. It is a rhythm that feels almost sacred. Back bent, arm extended, hand pressing, and then repeat. This methodical process continues all day, and sometimes for weeks on end. The children follow closely behind, splashing playfully in the shallows and mimicking the movements of their elders. They acquire their knowledge not from textbooks, but by standing in the water, feeling the subtle resistance of the mud, and intuitively learning the correct spacing by eye. This is how vital knowledge endures here, through lived experience, not just through spoken instruction. The planting is more than just arduous labor. It is a profound ceremony. Offerings are humbly made to the benevolent spirits of the mountain. Songs are sung softly, and in some of the villages, the elders will scatter the first handful of seedlings as a sacred blessing. Every field that is planted represents a solemn promise, a promise to the land, to their revered ancestors, and to the children who are yet to arrive. The pace of the work is unhurried. No one dares to rush the dragon. No one attempts to race the mountain. Instead, the rhythm of the planting evolves into a form of meditation, a slow, graceful dance between human and nature, one of unwavering patience and profound purpose. And as the days gently pass, vibrant green shoots begin to rise from the watery fields like hopeful whispers in the wind. From this moment forward, the terraces will not just be growing rice. They will be cultivating hope. Each tiny seed that is planted is a silent prayer, and each meticulously planted row is a quiet act of defiance against hunger and haste. And so, the cycle begins anew, not with noise or with fire, but with hands that are immersed in mud and hearts that are reaching for the sky. The dragon is awake, the mountain breathes, and the future is gently planted, one seed at a time. Scattered along the ridgelines and nestled within the graceful crooks of the terraces are the vibrant heartbeats of the dragon's backbone. Villages such as Ping'an, Dazai, and Jinking. These are not mere settlements. They are living museums of heritage, where every home, every winding path, and every wooden balcony clings to the side of the mountain like an enduring memory that steadfastly refuses to fade away. The houses here are constructed of timber, and they rest securely on stilts to protect them from the torrential rains and the inherent steepness of the slope. Their rooftops, which are dark and slanted, elegantly mirror the contours of the terraces that they majestically overlook. From above, they appear like delicate wooden lanterns that are gracefully floating on the emerald waves of green. Inside the homes, life is characterized by a sense of simplicity, warmth, and a profound sense of community. Generations will often share a single home. Meals are cooked over crackling wood fires, and the comforting aroma of rice wine and bamboo smoke gently drifts out into the crisp mountain air. The people who reside here belong to distinct ethnic minorities, primarily the Zhuang and the Red Yao, and each of them possesses their own unique language, cherished customs, and rich oral traditions. You will instantly recognize the Yao women. Their exceptionally long, black hair, which has been left uncut since their childhood, is meticulously coiled into elegant shapes on top of their heads. Some of them will allow it to cascade down like a silken waterfall when they are bathing in the river, a scene that is so graceful that it verges on being pure myth. Despite the creeping influence of modernization that is making its way up the mountain trails, the deeply ingrained traditions of these people remain remarkably strong. Their hand-woven clothes are meticulously dyed in a rich indigo color. Wooden looms can be heard creaking rhythmically in the quiet rooms of their homes, and music is played on melodious reed pipes and resonant bronze drums during the vibrant village festivals. Weddings still incorporate elaborate ritual dances, and the harvest is still enthusiastically welcomed with joyous songs. The hospitality here is not a mere transaction. It is an instinctive reflex. Guests are warmly offered tea that has been brewed from local leaves, rice wine that is served in intricately carved gourds, and captivating stories that have been passed down from the elders, who can vividly remember the mountain before electricity ever arrived. They speak of the majestic dragons that are concealed in the mist, of their revered ancestors who first meticulously carved these hills, and of the benevolent spirits who still faithfully guard the verdant fields. And although tourism now attracts visitors from every corner of the globe, the fundamental rhythm of village life continues on, largely undisturbed. The rice still flourishes, the sacred rituals still precisely mark the changing of the seasons, and the terraces, much like the people themselves, endure, not by stubbornly resisting change, but by gracefully absorbing it, slowly and carefully, much like the water as it descends from one level to the next. Here, nestled within the dragon's gentle coils, life is not rushed. It flows, it echoes, and it remembers. To traverse the terraces of Longji is to journey through layers of profound myth. The hills here are not merely composed of soil and stone. They are alive with captivating stories that are whispered through the swaying bamboo groves and carried gently on the wind. For the villagers, these majestic mountains are not just inert pieces of land. They are revered sacred beings, meticulously shaped by the ancient gods, faithfully guarded by benevolent spirits, and intricately inhabited by tales that have been passed down from one generation to the next. The most enduring legend speaks of a colossal sleeping dragon whose magnificent body stretches across the ridgelines of the mountains. Its spine rises up in graceful coils, which are, in fact, the very terraces themselves. The locals firmly believe that the elegant curves of the mountain are not man-made, but rather they are the enormous scales of the dragon, rising and falling with its rhythmic breath. When the mist gracefully rolls in from the valley and envelopes the paddies in a soft, white blanket, it is said that the dragon is stirring gently, breathing softly in its deep sleep. Another captivating tale recounts how the terraces were born from a moment of divine generosity. In a time of severe famine, the ancestors ascended the mountains and fervently prayed to the heavens for help. Moved by their profound devotion, the gods sent them abundant rain and instructed them to meticulously carve the hills into steps so that the rice could flourish. The people obediently complied, and the majestic dragon reportedly appeared to guide their hands as they worked. Ever since that day, they have honored the mountain with a deep sense of respect, never shouting loudly in the fields, and never cutting down the trees without first offering a prayer. These deeply held beliefs are not formally written down in books. They live on vibrantly in the songs that are sung during the arduous planting season, in the fragrant incense that is burned before a new growing cycle begins, and in the profound silence that is maintained during the misty mornings. The children grow up hearing these captivating tales not as mere fantasies, but as an undeniable truth that is intrinsically embedded within the very land itself. To scoff at the dragon is to risk a poor harvest. To disrespect the spirits is to invite devastating floods or a prolonged drought. There are also spirits that are believed to reside within the water. Some of the farmers still make small offerings before they release the spring water into the terraces for the first time each year. A few drops of rice wine, a quiet prayer that is murmured under their breath. This is not done for show, but simply out of an ingrained tradition, as natural and automatic as the act of tying one's shoe. And whether you personally believe in dragons or not, there is something undeniably sacred that hangs in the air here. Perhaps it is the profound silence. Perhaps it is the ethereal clouds. Or perhaps it is the quiet, unwavering certainty that this place transcends mere human labor. It is a living story that is still being told, meticulously written not in ink, but in enduring stone, vital water, and thriving rice. For centuries, the dragon's backbone remained a secret that was closely guarded by the mountains, remote, tranquil, and known only to those who called it their home. But no place, no matter how sacred it may be, remains untouched forever. The roads eventually arrived, and the power lines soon followed. Tourists, armed with their cameras and their smartphones, began to ascend the hills alongside the diligent farmers, and the terraces, ancient and weathered, were confronted with a new challenge that they had never faced before. How do you gracefully endure the modern world? At first, there was an understandable sense of apprehension. Some of the locals feared that the mountain would be sold off, piece by piece, to aggressive developers, that concrete would replace the traditional wood, and that their vibrant culture would devolve into nothing more than a costume for the tourists to gawk at. But the people of Longji did not simply endure. They skillfully adapted. Not by abandoning their cherished past, but by intricately weaving the present into it, one careful thread at a time. The villagers began to open up their homes to guests, not by operating as impersonal resorts, but as authentic family stays. The visitors would partake in the local meals, sticky rice that was steamed in bamboo, and wild greens that had been freshly picked that very morning. They would sleep in the traditional wooden stilt houses, where the roosters still faithfully announce the arrival of the sunrise. The experience is not meticulously curated for show. It is genuinely lived, honest, and profoundly real. And the farming continues on uninterrupted. Each season, the locals still flood the terraces, they still plant the rice by hand, and they still harvest it with sickles that have been worn smooth by time and labor. The children will attend school during the day, but they will still diligently assist in the fields at dusk. Tourism undoubtedly brings in a welcome source of income, but it is the rice that brings life itself. The one supports the other, and both are absolutely essential. Some of the young villagers have indeed left for the bustling cities, but many of them eventually return. There is something deeply magnetic about the terraces, something that is far more profound than mere nostalgia. It is the soothing sound of the water as it gracefully slides through the channels, the mesmerizing way that the stars are reflected in the flooded paddies, and the subtle way that the mountains inherently teach you a sense of patience. The local festivals have certainly grown louder. Yes, there are now microphones where there were once only traditional drums, and there are signs in both Mandarin and English that stand discreetly beside the sacred springs. But the ancient rituals still take place. The offerings are still humbly made, and the elders still lead the communal songs. The dragon's backbone did not resist the changes that came its way. It absorbed them with a remarkable sense of grace and a profound sense of balance. The terraces endure, not because they are frozen immutably in time, but because they breathe with time, flexing, adjusting, but never truly breaking. In an age where cherished traditions are often sacrificed in the relentless pursuit of progress, Longji stands as a quiet, compelling proof that progress can indeed proceed gently, if it so chooses, and that the old ways still possess a vital place in our modern world, especially when they are this exquisitely beautiful. The dragon's backbone is never precisely the same place twice. With each passing season, it sheds its skin, it transforms its colors, and it subtly shifts its mood. While the cities of the world may evolve over the course of years, the terraces change within a matter of weeks, draped not just in light, but in an intrinsic rhythm of their own. To stand among them through a full year is to witness a mountain that is truly breathing. Spring arrives like a vast liquid mirror. The terraces are flooded in preparation for the planting season, and the still water impeccably reflects the sky like a sheet of shimmering silver glass. The clouds drift not only above your head, but also seemingly below your feet. Visitors to the area often speak of feeling as though they are walking through heaven itself. The fields may appear to be empty, but they are brimming with an immense potential. Beneath the calm surface, new life is quietly stirring. The summer brings an explosive burst of vibrant green. The rice shoots stretch up tall and straight, blanketing the hills in an emerald cascade. From a distance, the terraces resemble endless ribbons of lush velvet, gracefully rolling in every direction. The air is warm and moist. The frogs call out loudly from the paddies, and the farmers, knee-deep in the water, labor from dawn till dusk, their straw hats bobbing up and down like tiny sails on a verdant sea. The autumn transforms the landscape into a symphony of gold. It is harvest time. The rice matures, and the terraces seem to catch fire in the sunlight, glowing with the ripened grain. The fields ripple beautifully in the wind, and the joyous sound of drums echoes through the villages. The families gather together. The songs are sung enthusiastically, and the sticky rice is lovingly cooked. It is not just a season, it is a profound celebration. The dragon, now fully awake, generously offers its bounty to the people. The winter draws the entire mountain into a state of serene stillness. The terraces become empty. The water slowly drains away. The snow will sometimes fall, dusting the steps in a soft, white powder. At other times, the frost will cling delicately to the walls like an intricate piece of lace. There are no tools to be seen in the fields, and no human voices can be heard, only a profound silence. The dragon sleeps, resting deeply, and patiently waiting for the return of the spring. Each season writes a distinctly different poem. The spring reflects, the summer grows, the autumn feeds, and the winter rests. The enduring beauty of Longji resides not only in its magnificent shape, but also in its profound, cyclical nature, in how it gracefully accepts the passage of time without any resistance, and in how it transforms itself quietly, never needing to loudly announce its presence. Photographers will diligently chase the light here, hoping to capture something that is eternal. But the terraces do not freeze their beauty for anyone. They move, they breathe, they gently teach us that true beauty is not static. It is a fluid rhythm, a continuous practice, and a promise that is faithfully renewed with every passing season. And so the dragon turns once more, not with a roar or a fiery blaze, but with the quiet power of water, grain, and wind. Ultimately, the terraces are far more than just mere fields. They represent a solemn vow, a vow that is quiet, gracefully curved, and meticulously carved into the side of the mountain. It is a profound promise that has been passed down from hand to hand, from season to season, and from generation to generation. The dragon's backbone is not simply a wonder of agriculture or a masterpiece of engineering. It is the compelling story of what can transpire when humans choose to live with the land, rather than aggressively against it. There were undoubtedly easier paths that could have been taken. The ancestors of Longji could have migrated down to the valleys or sought out flatter ground, but they chose to remain where they were. They diligently studied the slope of the mountain. They attentively listened to the stone. They faithfully followed the flow of the water, and in doing so, they rendered the impossible ordinary. successfully feeding entire villages on the side of a steep mountainside. Every graceful curve of the terraces holds a valuable lesson, not just about how to cultivate rice, but also about unwavering patience, about an enduring legacy, and about a profound sense of care. These terraces were not constructed in a matter of years, or even in decades. They required centuries to complete. There is no shortcut to achieving a sense of harmony, and there is no machine that can replicate the intricate knowledge that has been etched into each and every stone wall by the calloused hands and the quiet, persistent effort of the people. And yet, there is nothing about them that is rigidly frozen in time. The terraces are vibrantly alive. They are constantly evolving. They gracefully bend with the changing of the weather, with the evolving needs of the people, and with the shifting shape of the world itself. That is their enduring secret. They were never rigid. They were always fluid. Even now, as the modern world ascends the hills with its signals and its screens, the terraces remain profoundly grounded. They may change, but they do not vanish, because their roots extend far beyond the mere soil. They are deeply embedded in story, in sacred ritual, and in the simple, enduring act of planting a seed and faithfully trusting the sky to do the rest. To traverse the dragon's backbone is to witness a living contract between humanity and the earth, a contract that has been sealed with sweat and with sun, and that is faithfully renewed with every single harvest. It serves as a powerful reminder that progress does not always equate to speed, and that true greatness does not always announce itself with a roar. Sometimes, it murmurs softly, like a gentle stream as it slips over a smooth stone. And perhaps that is precisely why the terraces resonate with so many people, from the hardworking farmers to the curious travelers to the wistful dreamers, because they represent something that we have almost forgotten. That the most lasting things in this world are not built with brute force, but with an intricate rhythm, a profound sense of humility, and the patient embrace of time. The dragon sleeps, the people endure, and the mountain eternally remembers. Most of the visitors who come to Giza direct their gaze skyward, drawn irresistibly to the towering silhouettes of the pyramids and the enigmatic gaze of the Great Sphinx. But few of them ever inquire about what lies beneath the surface. Underneath the vast desert sand, beneath the flowing waters of the Nile, and beneath the centuries of forgotten currents. For in the quiet shallows near the ancient village of Abu Rawash, which is just a short distance from the Giza Plateau, a strange and persistent tale begins to stir. It speaks of something that is enormous, severely eroded, and largely ignored, an underwater sphinx. The local fishermen have been whispering about it for generations. A smooth-backed shape that appears to be far too symmetrical to be a natural formation. A distinct feline form that is half buried in the mud and the waterlogged sediment. When the waters of the Nile recede during periods of drought, parts of it become visible, stone curves, distinct grooves, and what some people have claimed is a carved paw, impossibly worn but unmistakably shaped by human hands. It does not lie along the well-trodden tourist routes. There are no prominent guideposts, no velvet ropes, and no tour buses that are idling nearby. There is just an area that is thick with reeds, brackish water, and a profound sense of silence. The explorers who have ventured out there have claimed that the very land itself feels different, as if it is charged with an ancient memory that is clinging tenaciously to it. Beneath the murky waters, sonar scans have detected distinct geometric patterns and what appear to be blocks of stone that have been intentionally placed. But what is truly startling are the claims that this figure, a sphinx-like formation that is submerged near Giza, may predate the pyramids entirely, not by decades but by millennia. If this is true, it would fundamentally shatter the established chronology of Egyptian civilization. The mainstream timeline firmly places the construction of the Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE. But this underwater form, if it has been genuinely carved, could belong to an age when the Sahara was still green and the Nile flowed wildly through a wetter, far more lush landscape. The skeptics, of course, have dismissed it as nothing more than a misidentified rock formation, a piece of limestone that has been shaped by millennia of water and fervent wishful thinking. But the precise grooves, the deliberate curves, and the alignment with certain celestial markers, it all provokes more questions than it does easy answers. The site remains officially unexcavated. Mainstream archaeologists have largely ignored it, Perhaps it amounts to nothing at all, or perhaps it means everything. A relic not just of Egypt's ancient past, but of an entire world that has been lost to flood and to time. For now, the so-called underwater Sphinx lies quietly, not sleeping, but patiently waiting. And if it could speak, one can only wonder what profound secrets it would reveal, and why so many people seem to be so determined not to listen. The legend of the underwater Sphinx transitioned from whispered folklore to a global curiosity in the 1980s. This was when a few independent researchers and divers began to publish some very unusual reports, accounts of a massive, lion-bodied figure that was partially submerged near the Giza Plateau. The early photographs that were taken were grainy, inconclusive, and often readily dismissed, but they ignited something that could not be so easily contained: an intense curiosity and, more dangerously, a persistent sense of doubt. One of the most vocal of the early proponents was an amateur Egyptologist who claimed to have seen a deeply weathered monument that was submerged beneath layers of silt and flood deposits during a brief window of drought. According to him, the figure was not an isolated rock or an optical illusion that had been caused by erosion. It possessed a clear sense of geometry, distinct legs, an unmistakable symmetry, and even the faint suggestion of a carved face. Naturally, this directly challenged the traditional narrative of history. Egyptology, as an academic discipline, relies heavily on established structures and accepted timelines. Most scholars firmly place the construction of the Giza pyramids and the iconic Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE, during the reign of the pharaoh Khafre. The suggestion of another Sphinx, one that was potentially older and partially submerged, would necessitate a fundamental rethinking not just of Egyptian history, but of the very timeline of human civilization itself. The mainstream academics responded to these claims with a considerable amount of caution, and often with outright disdain. Without a peer-reviewed excavation, reliable carbon dating, or any rigorous stratigraphic studies, the claim simply could not be taken seriously. Many of them argued that the so-called underwater Sphinx was likely just a natural geological formation, a piece of limestone that had been weathered and shaped by thousands of years of Nile flooding and sediment erosion. In Egypt, they pointed out, nature will frequently mimic an intentional design. The wind, the water, and the passage of time are all undeniably capable sculptors. But the intriguing photographs continued to circulate. The sonar readings persistently showed a series of unusual patterns that were too regular, too smooth, and too suggestive of an artificial shaping. And then came the theorists. Authors, filmmakers, and fringe historians began to construct elaborate stories around the mystery. They proposed that the Sphinx was a relic of a forgotten civilization, perhaps that of the Atlanteans, or perhaps of a pre-dynastic Egyptian culture, one that was tragically lost in a cataclysmic flood that scoured the ancient Sahara. They highlighted the unusual water erosion patterns that are visible on the original Great Sphinx. They argued for the existence of lost ancient technologies, and they hinted that what lay hidden beneath the waters of the Nile might be far older than our accepted historical memory would permit. The debate grew louder, but the physical ground remained undisturbed. No official excavation was ever launched, no major museum ever claimed the discovery, and the Sphinx, if that is indeed what it is, remained precisely where it had always been, buried in the silt, caught precariously between a compelling myth and the obscuring mud. The idea that something near Giza might predate the pyramids is not just provocative. It is genuinely revolutionary. If the underwater Sphinx proves to be more than just mere erosion or a remarkable coincidence, then the story of Egypt did not begin in the 4th dynasty. It began much earlier, deep in the annals of prehistory, during an era when the Sahara was a green savanna and the Nile flowed wider, wilder, and far less predictably than it does today. This compelling possibility gained a significant amount of traction in the 1990s, when the geologist Dr. Robert Schoch meticulously studied the Great Sphinx itself. He asserted that the deep, vertical weathering that is visible on the Sphinx's enclosure was not caused by wind and sand, but by heavy, sustained, ancient rainfall conditions that had not existed on the Giza Plateau since at least 7000 BCE. That powerful argument pushed the possible construction date of the Sphinx back by thousands of years, long before the first pharaohs ever began to carve their names into stone. If water had indeed shaped the original Sphinx, could it also have concealed an even older sibling? The The so-called underwater Sphinx is located in a lower region of the land, near the ancient floodplains. Some satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar scans have suggested the presence of possible foundations, rectangular outlines, and a deliberate shaping, all of which are buried beneath layers of silt and seasonal water. These indicators hint that the site may not just be older than the Great Sphinx. It may have originated from a time when nothing in Egypt was yet being recorded in hieroglyphs. The supporters of this theory point to the missing historical chapters of Egypt, the significant gap that exists between the end of the Ice Age and the verifiable rise of the first dynasties. During this vast period of time, the Nile drastically shifted its courses. The Sahara transitioned from a lush, wet grassland into an arid desert, and civilizations may have silently risen and fallen, completely undocumented and irrevocably erased from the pages of history. The notion that an ancient people, one that was pre-literate and pre-pharaonic, could have sculpted a monument of this immense scale seems implausible to the traditional historians. But is it truly? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, for instance, was constructed around 9600 BCE by a society of hunter-gatherers. It features megalithic pillars with intricately carved animals, and it predates Stonehenge by thousands of years. Could Egypt be harboring a similar secret? An ancient culture that had marked the land with a monumental stone long before the invention of papyrus to carry their stories? If the underwater Sphinx was indeed built in such a remote era, it would fundamentally alter everything that we know about human history. It would suggest not just a collection of forgotten ruins, but an entire forgotten age. An age that may have subtly influenced the builders of Giza, leaving behind more than just a myth and perhaps a tangible monument that was drowned and then forgotten. The stone does not lie, it remembers, and around the site of the so-called underwater Sphinx, it narrates a quiet but persistent story, a narrative that is not just of time, but is profoundly of water. The sediment layers, the distinctive erosion marks, and the ancient flood patterns all hint at a history that stretches long before the desert ever became dry, long before the Nile settled into its familiar course, and long before the pharaohs ever began to carve their names into the recorded history of the world. The geologists who have meticulously examined the photographs and the data from the site near Abu Roash have noted some very peculiar erosion marks. Smooth, rounded grooves that strongly suggest a prolonged exposure to actively flowing water. These marks are indicative of forces that are not of wind or sand, but of substantial rainfall and a continuous movement of water, forces that have been absent from this region for thousands of years. Similar arguments have been compellingly made about the Great Sphinx itself, particularly with regard to its enclosure wall. The critics of the standard timeline have emphasized that the deep, vertical fissures that have been observed on the trench that surrounds the Sphinx bear no resemblance whatsoever to wind erosion. Instead, they precisely mimic the effects of a heavy, sustained, prehistoric rainfall. Now, at the alleged site of the underwater Sphinx, we can observe the identical signature, only this time it is concealed beneath a shallow flood basin. During the periods of low Nile flow or during active excavation, parts of the structure are reportedly visible, lion-like haunches, shoulders, and a foundation that appears to be far too level to have been naturally formed. The researchers who have surveyed the area have noted that the basin is geologically active, and it is characterized by a high content of clay and clear evidence of the ancient water tables having violently fluctuated over time. The stone there is indeed heavily worn, but it is not worn in a random fashion. The wear meticulously follows the precise shape of the structure itself, flowing in lines that strongly suggest a deliberate carving, which was then followed by a subsequent submergence. Some of the sediment layers that surround the site have been dated back to the early Holocene period, a time when Egypt was significantly wetter, greener, and prone to massive, recurring floods. If a monument had been carved during that time, it could have stood for centuries before it was eventually swallowed up by the mud, forgotten by the shifting human populations, and ultimately buried under the wandering silt of the Nile. The skeptics have argued that this is all just a mere coincidence, a series of natural formations that have been interpreted into a myth by a group of hopeful eyes. But water does not spontaneously form symmetry. It does not carve out paws, and it does not create perfectly aligned foundations or echo the precise geometry of a known sphinx that is located just a few miles away. So, the question intensifies: if the water has deliberately erased this monument from our view, what else has it taken with it? And, more urgently, how much of our history still lies hidden just beneath the surface? If the underwater Sphinx is truly there, silent, meticulously carved, and profoundly ancient, then why has it not been excavated? Why does it remain beneath the layers of mud and a pervasive silence, consistently overlooked by the archaeologists, ignored by the governments, and left to the mercies of the river's currents? The answer, much like the artifact itself, lies subtly beneath the surface. Egypt's archaeological institutions are fiercely protective of their heritage, and justifiably so. The nation diligently guards its ancient history with rigid protocols, strict excavation rules, and an unwavering insistence on academic consensus. To unearth any site, especially one that would fundamentally challenge the traditional historical timeline, would require extensive permits, substantial funding, international oversight, and, most importantly, institutional approval. And that crucial approval often hinges on one unspoken rule: do not attempt to rewrite the established history of Egypt without an overwhelming mountain of undeniable evidence. And therein lies the core of the problem. The so-called underwater Sphinx has never received an official, state-sponsored excavation. Independent researchers, foreign academics, and fringe theorists have indeed studied the area, but without any formal backing, their findings remain purely anecdotal, tantalizingly suggestive, but not definitively conclusive. There is also the complex issue of the Nile itself. The river is not a static feature. It floods, it recedes, and it subtly shifts its course over the decades. The specific site where the monument is alleged to rest is a flood-prone area, and it is often submerged for much of the year. Any excavation would necessitate the draining of the entire area, the meticulous rerouting of the water, the diligent protection of the nearby delicate ecosystems, and the careful management of any structural damage that has been caused by centuries of sediment pressure. That alone would demand years, if not decades, of an intensive and concerted effort. Then there are the significant political factors to consider. A discovery of this immense magnitude, if it were to be conclusively validated, would disrupt more than just the established academic timelines. It could challenge the deeply ingrained national narratives, potentially upset the national pride, and attract an intense media frenzy that Egypt might not be so eager to welcome. The Ministry of Antiquities typically prefers to promote the discoveries that will reinforce the grandeur and the historical continuity of Egypt, not those that would fundamentally question its foundational history. Some whispers have suggested that certain institutions may already possess more knowledge than they are publicly revealing, and that preliminary studies have been conducted discreetly behind closed doors. But without any official public records, peer-reviewed findings, or government announcements, these claims will inevitably drift into the realm of conspiracy theory. And so, the monument remains buried. Whether by accident or by deliberate design, it rests beneath the layers of mud and skepticism. It is a strange irony that in a land that is so utterly obsessed with meticulously preserving its ancient past, one of its greatest mysteries may be hidden in plain sight, unclaimed, unstudied, and untouched by the official records of time. But nothing truly stays buried forever. To the ancient Egyptians, the Sphinx was far more than just a mere sculpture. It was a powerful symbol, part guardian, part divine entity, and part enduring mystery. Possessing the body of a lion and the head of a man, the Sphinx represented the fusion of raw strength with profound wisdom, of physical power that had been gracefully tamed by the royal mind. It served as a cosmic sentinel, strategically placed at the thresholds where the divine realm would intersect with the mortal world. The most renowned of all the sphinxes, of course, is the Great Sphinx of Giza. Towering 66 feet high, it has vigilantly guarded the plateau for over 4,000 years, perpetually facing the rising sun and watching over the sacred tombs of the pharaohs. Its precise origin remains a subject of intense debate. Some have asserted that it was constructed by the pharaoh Khafre. Others have argued that it may be considerably older, its face perhaps having been recarved and altered over the course of time. So what would it profoundly signify if a second Sphinx, one that is hidden, water-worn, and potentially even older, truly exists just a few miles away? It would fundamentally change everything that we currently understand about ancient history. There are no known records that explicitly mention the existence of twin sphinxes at Giza, the ancient texts remain conspicuously silent on this matter. But in the later Greco-Roman traditions, there are mentions of powerful guardians that were positioned in a perfect sense of balance, flanking the sacred spaces. In Egyptian architecture, symmetry is sacred. The temples will frequently feature twin statues, twin obelisks, and twin avenues of lions. So why not twin sphinxes? Some researchers have contended that the so-called underwater sphinx might not be a copy of the Great Sphinx, but rather the original, a prototype, a pre-dynastic version that was later replicated on a much grander scale. If this is true, it would suggest that the fundamental idea of the Sphinx originated not from the dynastic builders, but from a forgotten culture whose myths were carried forward, adopted, and subsequently refined over time. And if this monument was genuinely built before the invention of written history, it may not be bound by the pharaonic ideology at all. Its true purpose could have been astronomical, profoundly ritualistic, or even purely commemorative, marking a pivotal event, a cataclysmic flood, or honoring a forgotten deity. The lion shape itself is no mere accident. In ancient Egypt, the lion symbolized the horizon, the metaphorical gate of both the dawn and the dusk. A sphinx that is facing to the east is perpetually watching the rebirth of the sun, for all of eternity. To carve one was to permanently freeze that sacred act in stone. Now, imagine one that was carved before the pyramids, perfectly aligned, diligently guarding, and patiently waiting. It would not merely rewrite history, it would profoundly redefine the entire mythos of Egypt itself, not as the genesis of civilization, but as the last resonant echo of something that was even older. And the fact that this powerful symbol might be sleeping beneath the water? Well, that is all the more fitting for a silent guardian of the lost worlds. As the whispers of the underwater sphinx have spread further across the world, a quiet, yet profound, divide has begun to emerge, one that runs deeper than mere sediment or stone. On one side of this divide stands the traditional school of Egyptology, cautious, meticulously structured, and firmly rooted in the established academic consensus. On the other side, there is a growing community of independent researchers, alternative historians, and curious minds who firmly believe that something truly extraordinary is being overlooked. The mainstream scholars adamantly insist on verifiable evidence, peer-reviewed studies, rigorous stratigraphy, undeniable inscriptions, and precise radiocarbon dates. Their concern is not unwarranted. Egypt is replete with natural rock formations that bear an uncanny resemblance to human or animal shapes, and misidentifying them can regrettably lead to the widespread dissemination of misinformation. Archaeology, after all, demands an extreme sense of caution. The past is fragile. It cannot be reconstructed once it has been irrevocably broken by careless hands or reckless media hype. But to others, this caution has unfortunately devolved into a state of complacency. The independent investigators, many of whom are trained scientists or engineers from outside of the conventional archaeological field, have argued that the underwater sphinx and other similar anomalies warrant a much deeper, more unbiased study. They have pointed to the high-resolution satellite images that reveal an unnatural sense of symmetry, to the LiDAR scans that have detected rectangular foundations that are hidden beneath the layers of mud, and to the erosion patterns that appear to have been shaped not by chaos, but by a deliberate design. They have also questioned the potential political motivations that may be behind the pervasive silence. The tourism dollars in Egypt flow primarily through the well-trodden, officially sanctioned monuments. A new sphinx, especially one that would directly threaten the accepted historical timeline, could significantly disrupt the country's established narrative and its official authority. The fear, they have suggested, is not of a hoax, but of having to fundamentally rewrite everything that we thought we knew. Books, documentaries, podcasts, and conferences now regularly feature the intriguing story of the underwater sphinx. It has become a potent symbol of our hidden history, serving as both a rallying cry for further investigation and a cautionary tale against the dangers of dogmatic thinking. The supporters passionately call for an open excavation, while the detractors vehemently warn against the promotion of pseudoscience. The elusive truth, as it always is lost somewhere in the middle, buried beneath a series of competing voices that are as dense as the silt of the Nile. This divide is not merely an academic one. It is also deeply emotional. It speaks to how we choose to approach the past. Do we trust only what has been definitively confirmed, or do we courageously follow the tantalizing hints that have been left just beyond our current grasp? The underwater Sphinx forces that fundamental question out into the open. It is not just a rock or a relic. It is a profound litmus test for just how curious and open-minded we are truly permitted to be. And as long as it remains unexcavated, both sides will continue their fervent arguments above a monument that speaks nothing, yet might ultimately have the power to change everything. There is something profoundly haunting about a mystery that is concealed in plain sight, especially when it bears the regal face of a lion and stares up from the mud with an ancient, silent wisdom. The so-called underwater Sphinx near Giza may or may not be real, but its captivating pull is undeniable. It stirs something deep within us, a powerful yearning not just to discover, but to profoundly remember. Because deep down, the story of a forgotten monument taps into something that is far older than the field of archaeology. The intrinsic human sense of loss. We have always lived alongside the ruins of the past. The cities have crumbled, the languages have died, and the civilizations have vanished beneath the waves, the sand, and the ash. We look to the past not merely for answers, but for our very own identity. Who were we truly? How far back do our intricate stories really stretch? And what have we inadvertently forgotten in our relentless rush toward what we perceive as progress? If the underwater Sphinx is indeed real, if it was meticulously carved by human hands long before the advent of recorded history, then it transcends being just a mere relic. It transforms into a powerful voice from a chapter of human existence that we did not even know existed. A poignant marker from an age when people may have understood the stars in a different way, honored the earth more intimately, or possessed a rich mythology that we can now only vaguely guess at. Some people believe that it belongs to an advanced prehistoric culture that was tragically lost to a global catastrophe, a theory that is often dismissed as being on the fringe. But regardless of whether that is true or not, the emotional gravity of the possibility still remains. To imagine a monument that was carved long before the pyramids, that was subsequently submerged by the rising waters, and that was then completely erased from our collective memory, is to confront the profound fragility of civilization itself. And perhaps that is precisely why this story persists. It reminds us that time is not always a linear progression, that empires are only temporary, and that even solid stone can disappear if the river flows for long enough. But more importantly, it reminds us that the age of discovery is far from being over, and that the earth still holds profound secrets that have not yet been chronicled in our textbooks. In an era that is so often defined by instant answers and pervasive global data, the underwater Sphinx is a rare and precious thing. An unanswered question, a tantalizing possibility, and a profound mystery that has not yet been definitively solved by drones or by algorithms. And whether it ultimately proves to be a natural rock formation or a forgotten monument, it already possesses an immense value, simply because it compels us to wonder. To wonder if our past is far deeper than we had ever conceived. To wonder if our myths indeed hold some buried memories. And to wonder what profound truths may be lying just beneath the surface, patiently waiting for someone to finally listen to them. The underwater Sphinx of Giza, whether it was meticulously carved or naturally formed, whether it has been officially confirmed or widely dismissed, remains precisely where it has always been, beneath the surface, beneath the mud, the water, and the immense weight of time. It bears no identifying plaque, no name, and no spotlight to shine upon it. And yet, it speaks softly in the profound absence of any answers. For every magnificent monument that we have successfully unearthed in Egypt, there are countless others that are still buried, still patiently waiting to be discovered. Some of them are too fragile to be uncovered without risking their complete destruction. Others have been irrevocably lost to the shifting courses of the Nile, drowned beneath the layers of silt and a deliberate sense of secrecy. And a select few, like this one, lie in plain view, ignored not because they lack any importance, but because they pose questions that we are not yet prepared to answer. Perhaps that is precisely what makes the underwater Sphinx so powerful. Not its colossal size, not its immense age, but its profound silence. It forces us to directly confront the limitations of what we so confidently claim to know, and the inherent discomfort of what we might have persistently overlooked. In truth, it may never be officially excavated. The complexities of politics, of funding, and of a deeply ingrained tradition form walls that are taller than any ancient tomb. But that does not render it irrelevant. Quite the opposite. The monument's very obscurity has transformed it into a mirror, one that is reflecting not just what lies buried, but also what we collectively choose to remember and what we conveniently choose to forget. It also serves as a potent reminder that history is not a closed book that has been definitively written. It is a living, evolving puzzle, one that is scattered across the landscapes and the shorelines of our world, patiently awaiting a shift in the tide, a change in our thinking, or a brave question that will respectfully unsettle the accumulated dust of time. Perhaps one day, the water will finally recede, and its full form will majestically rise up from the depths. Pause, face, and all. Perhaps an advanced form of radar will finally confirm what our myths have long been suggesting. Or perhaps the mystery will forever remain, passed on from one generation to the next like a timeless whisper between the ancient stones. But whether it proves to be a true monument or a mere mirage, the underwater Sphinx already serves its greatest purpose. It powerfully stirs the human imagination. And in a world that is so often drowning in an overwhelming sense of certainty, that gift of wonder may be its greatest contribution of all. Because perhaps the most ancient of things are not just buried in the sand or lost to the passage of time. Maybe they are buried deep within us, within our innate need to explore, to remember, and to believe that somewhere out there, beneath the waves or the vast deserts, the past still breathes and still patiently waits to be found.